Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and I hope you all had a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving. It was very quiet at our house. It was just me and my hubby and the pets, but I actually spoke to more family on this Thanksgiving than I ever have on any previous Thanksgiving, and that is because we did a Zoom call with my husband's family, and there were about 50 people on that call, and we portaled with my family, and there were, 16, I think, people on that call. My family's a lot smaller than my husband's family, but it was so nice to see everybody. I wish I could have hugged them all as well, but at least we got to see them, and it was wonderful. So very thankful that we were able to do that, and thankful for the technology that enabled us to do that and to see so many people on Thanksgiving. Hope your holiday was nice as well. We're here, of course, to talk about books, and I am speaking with author Hank Phillippi Ryan today. Hank is an investigative reporter who also writes suspense and thrillers, psychological suspense. So her book is called The First to Lie. That's the book we're talking about today. Here is the blurb from the back. We all have our reasons for being who we are, but what if being someone else could get you what you want? After a devastating betrayal, a young woman sets off on an obsessive path to justice, no matter what dark family secrets are revealed. What she doesn't know, she isn't the only one plotting her revenge. An affluent daughter of privilege, a glamorous, manipulative wannabe, a determined reporter in too deep, a grieving widow who must choose her own reality. Who will be the first to lie? And when the stakes are life and death, do a few lies really matter? Best-selling and award-winning author and investigative reporter Hank Phillippi Ryan delivers another twisty, thrilling cat-and-mouse novel of suspense that will have you guessing and second-guessing and then gasping with surprise. That is the description of The First to Lie. Again, the author is Hank Phillippi Ryan, and this book is told from 4 different points of view, and you're never quite sure who's playing what role in the novel. There are a lot of twists and turns. The ending will most likely take you by surprise. It is very, very, twisty. The back says that as well, right? Twisty, thrilling cat and mouse. And that is exactly accurate. It's very twisty, and it takes a lot of different turns. And it is suspenseful, and it's about, it's also about relationships and how those relationships affect our life and how we, how we move forward when things get complicated with those relationships. So let's go ahead now and turn to the interview with Hank. Again, the book is called The First to Lie. Hi, Hank. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. This is so exciting. Thank you for inviting me.
I am very excited to have you here. We are going to talk about your book, The First to Lie. Before we get to the book, though, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Oh my gosh, I'm here in Boston, Massachusetts on a beautiful fall day, looking out the window at the sugar maple tree, which is in a bay window outside my office. I'm sitting at my writing desk where I've written 12 thrillers, and I'm working on my 13th, which is due in a week. So that's terrifying. Let's see what I can tell you. I am the USA Today bestselling author of 12 novels of suspense, crime fiction, psychological suspense. I'm also the investigative reporter for Channel 7 here in Boston, where I've been on television for 43 years, if you can imagine, and won 37 Emmys for investigative reporting. So I'm sort of juggling two careers, both of which I love. I started writing crime fiction when I was 55, crazily enough, and I've won, let's see, 5 Agathas and 3 Anthonys. No, 4, because my book, The Murder List, just won the Anthony for Best Novel of the Year. And I've won the Mary Higgins Clark Award. And so I'm sort of, we can talk about this, I'm sort of the poster child for following your dreams in midlife and trying a new career or an additional career, which so far, so good, knock on wood, has been glorious.
I love that. Thank you. And congratulations on the most recent award. That's wonderful.
Oh my goodness, I was so thrilled about it. You know, it was the Anthony Award, named for Anthony Boucher, who was the one of the founders of Mystery Writers of America and also a mystery reviewer for the New York Times. BoucherCon, the convention name for him, was held virtually this year. It's usually 2,000 people, readers and authors in Dallas or Sacramento or New York or wherever it's held each year. Is different every year. So we were all together on Zoom, thousands of people, and I am telling you, when they announced my name as the winner, well, I was up against Laura Lippman and Alex Segura and Steph Cha and Rachel Housel Hall. And it was, you know, so it's one of those things where I think, well, you know, it's really great to be nominated, but there's not a chance. And when they called my name, I wish I had a video of my face, because I was quite surprised. But having The Murder List be the best novel of the year is jaw-droppingly wonderful. So thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you needed somebody there to just like screenshot your face when you won.
Wouldn't that have been funny? I'm glad it didn't happen, because I'm sure there's never been such shock. So that people can just imagine that. People can just imagine shock and delight. You know, it's
right.
Having the approval of the fiction writing community is quite spectacular. We all write by ourselves every day. We're sitting at our desks, wondering what's going to happen next in the book and wondering what's going to happen next in our careers and imagining people reading our books. You know, that's such a crazy thought. The idea that these words that we put down on paper are going to, you know, be transmitted by page or by the internet to someone else, and then they will read it, and those words and those new worlds will be real. It's crazy to think about that. So it's such a responsibility, and we all work so hard at it to be unique and entertaining and exciting and page turning. So when someone says, yes, you succeeded, it's just an immense joy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. So let's turn now to the newest book. I do want to say, wow, you have a deadline a week after Thanksgiving. That stinks.
Well, you know, I've got to say, it's at this time, it's not like we're going anywhere. So.
Well, yeah, unfortunately this year that is true.
Yeah.
So the book is called The First to Lie, and if you can give an overview of the story.
Yes. Well, you know what the interesting thing about that is, Sarah, that, you know, when you write a psychological standalone, which is what The First to Lie is, and then someone says, what's the book about, which is a completely reasonable question. When it comes to The First to Lie, that's a very difficult thing to do, because part of my joy in writing the book was to make it be sort of mind-bendingly crime fiction. So there was a funny thing on Twitter that said, tell about your book in 4 words. And that's a very difficult thing to do, but I figured out betrayal, motherhood, obsession, and revenge. And I thought, okay, now that is exactly what The First to Lie is about: betrayal, motherhood, obsession, revenge. And then I saw something on Facebook, of all places, that said, describe your book in 5 sentences. So I thought, well, let me see if I can do that. So 5 phrases. So the first phrase is a devastating childhood betrayal, an undercover reporter who's in too deep, a beautiful sailboat on the Chesapeake Bay, a rich and powerful family, and an ice pick that is not used for ice. So, bottom line, The First to Lie is a high stakes, it's two smart women facing off. Let me see how to put this. Two smart women facing off in a high stakes psychological cat and mouse game to get revenge for a devastating childhood betrayal. But which woman is the cat and which woman is the mouse? And that is The First to Lie.
Yeah, and everything you just said is true, and also doesn't tell, tells you a lot.
Doesn't give it away, right? I just don't want
to. Time, right?
I
look
look at
give it away.
Exactly. I look at reviews sometimes and I think, why would you give that away? Why would you tell that? When a reviewer,
right.
often an amateur reviewer, just decides to do a book report and tell the whole story. There's nothing that breaks my heart more than that, because I love to have my readers, and my readers are smart. I love to have my readers read the book with an open mind and have the fun of enjoying all the twists and turns and surprises along the way.
Exactly.
Let's go ahead and take our first break of the podcast. When we come back, Hank will be speaking more about the themes of the book, family trust, family loyalty, how those come into play with the story. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with Hank Phillippi Ryan about her novel, The First to Lie. Before the break, we were talking about the premise of the book and how sometimes trying to describe a book can be difficult, especially in a short space of time. So just wanted to remind you of that so that my next comment will make a little more sense. Let's go ahead and return now to that interview.
I often speak to my parents or my parents-in-law after I do interviews, and they'll ask me, "Oh, what author did you talk to, and what was the book about?" And I was thinking, I have no idea how to explain this book. It's just a brief summary. Yeah,
it's a good thing. But it's a high-stakes psychological cat and mouse game. I mean, that's what it is. But the reader doesn't know which person is the cat and which person is the mouse. And it's about family. It's about family trust and family loyalty. It's about truth and what we believe and what is truth. And when there is money involved, what is the greater good? If there's, for instance, a medication that may do a lot of good to a lot of people, but devastatingly harms a few, you see how the point of view differs depending on whether you're the few or the many, and also whether you're the pharmaceutical company who's making this medicine. How much would you tell a patient if their life was in the balance, and so was your financial bottom line? So all those kinds of ethical, moral dilemmas I wanted to have sort of be thematically in The First to Lie. But it's really about, and you can tell your family, it's really about family. It's about devotion to family and our joy in having a family and our desire to have a family and our need to keep our family members safe. That's what it's really about. So, it's a fast-paced, page-turning thriller. I want it to be entertaining. I want you to miss your stop on the bus because you just can't wait to read the next chapter. But I do think when a book is really important, when you close the book, you think, oh, I never looked at the world that way before. I never thought about it that way before. The next time I see my mother, or the next time I go to the doctor, or the next time I make a decision, um, or the next time I see my child, I'm going to look at the world a different way. And that's what I'm hoping for. Besides people applauding at the end and saying, I never saw that coming. And that's what I want as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So what was your initial inspiration for the story?
Well, that's a really great question because, as I said, I'm an investigative reporter, and I've wired myself with hidden cameras and confronted corrupt politicians and chased down criminals and gone undercover and in disguise. And the first lie came, I realized as I was writing it, actually, came from an undercover story that I did many years ago, where I dressed up, and you can't see me on radio, luckily, but I had my hair up in a bun and no makeup and big glasses, and I wore 3 sweatshirts so I would change what my body looked like. And I pretended to be a woman who was who was going to the doctor, who wanted to get some advice about getting pregnant. And my producer and I, a man who dressed up as my husband, my producer didn't have to dress up very much to look like my husband. So, went to the doctors to try to find out whether they would tell us the truth about their legal histories. And I was wearing a hidden camera throughout. So under my sweatshirt was the lens poking out of a buttonhole, the lens of a hidden camera, and attached to that lens and snaking down under my sweatshirt was the wire that went to the guts of the camera that was in a fanny pack that I was so glamorously wearing. And that doctor lied to us, and several more doctors lied to us, and we did a big story about it. And as a result of that story, the regulations in Massachusetts were changed so that doctors' legal records have to be public, and before they weren't. So that was a major change in Massachusetts. That was a result of our investigation, and that's great. But when I started thinking about that story, I realized that the reason that story worked was that those doctors lied to me. And they lied because they were selfish, and they lied because they wanted money, and they lied because they wanted me and my fake husband to pay them to be patients. But I had also lied to them, right? I didn't go into those doctors' offices and say, I'm Hank Phillippi Ryan from Channel 7. Could you tell me something, something, something? I didn't do that. But I lied for the greater good. And I became someone else to get what I wanted. And I started thinking, when is it okay to lie? And what if being someone else could get you what you want? And that undercover investigation was sort of the germ, the seedling that started growing that became the first to lie. What is our relationship with our doctors when it comes to medication? How much should we demand to know? How much should we believe? And don't we need to understand how potentially devastatingly life-changing those discussions can be? Again, it's a mother-daughter story. It's a murder mystery. It's a triple murder mystery, with mind games and deception and gaslighting and twists and turns along the way. But that's where it came from. That's the real life experience that it came from.
Thank you. And wow, that's something that you kind of just think about like on TV. You don't. So it's fun to hear an actual story of someone who is an investigative reporter and went undercover. That's very cool.
Well, going undercover I've done it so many times, and it's terrifying every time, I have to say, because it's sort of like method acting, and you really have to believe that you are the person you're pretending to be. And there's, every single bit of you has to believe that you are who you're pretending to be. And you can only really save out, a tiny percent to remember, I'm a reporter, I need to get a wide shot, I need to get a tight shot. I need to get pictures of the documents. I need to get this person to tell me something, to reveal something. And I can't let them see my hidden camera, and I can't let them know who I really am. And there's this constant undercurrent of wondering, is this going to work? And you can't let any of that show. You know, that you have to just act like you are who you say you are. So it's kind of a juggle. It's a big juggle, and it's kind of terrifying because even though going undercover is not illegal in Massachusetts, you can shoot video of someone if it's silent. You can't record someone's voice if they don't know it, but you can take their picture if they don't know it. So even though I was never doing anything illegal, I knew that if the people I was taping found out that I had a hidden camera, they were not going to be happy about it.
Right.
So
right.
It behooved me not to let them know.
In terms of the story, then, you said there's the two women, the cat and the mouse, but which one is which?
Yes.
And they have different motives. Can you talk a little bit about those characters and how they might resonate with readers?
Well, that's interesting. If I could just say briefly, let me say there are a couple of different main characters. There are 4 points of view in the story, so if we just take them one at a time, and they're clearly marked in the book, so you always know whose story you're reading. There's Ellie, an investigative reporter who is working to uncover the secrets of a pharmaceutical company that she thinks may be lying to patients. And I think that, being an undercover reporter, being an investigative reporter, I mean, she's 30-something. She's working hard to make a career. She's juggling her own personal life, which we know a little bit about, but not a tremendous amount about. But I think we all love people who are determined and honorable and eager to do their jobs and eager to change the world, make a difference and shine a light on problems. And I think, when there's a good investigative reporter, someone like Ellie, she's funny and smart and determined and devoted and honorable. And so we like her. There's Meg, who Meg is a salesperson for the pharmaceutical company that Ellie is looking into. Their paths don't cross until later. Meg is sort of an enigma because she's beautiful and smart, but we know that she's got something else going on. There's something else that she's doing as she goes from doctor's office to doctor's office, selling this new miracle drug to doctors. Then there's Brooke, who is 15 or 16 years old, who is obviously a teenager growing up. And she is struggling to make peace with her family. She feels that she's been horribly betrayed by her parents, and she's trying to find her place in the world as a result of that. And then there's Lacey, who is in her early 20s, who has just married into the life of her dreams. She's married to a man that she loves, into a family that is rich and powerful and famous, and all she wants to do and all she ever wants to do is have children. So you can see how all of those women are parts of each of us: the hard worker, the person with secrets, the person who was a teenager and wasn't quite sure about whether her parents were doing the right thing, and the young woman who's looking forward to maybe having her dreams come true, and having her first child and her first family. So I think, all of us are either on that path in some way or have been on that path in some way. So it's kind of interesting to think about the little segments of each of us that each of those 4 main characters, Ellie, Meg, Lacey, and Brooke, represent. I think we've all been one or the other or all of them.
All right, time to take our second break of the podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking more about those 4 points of view in the book. And so stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with author Hank Phillippi Ryan about her book, The First to Lie.
I'm listening to you describe the characters and everything. I actually wasn't quite sure how to frame that question. You know, there's not often 4 points of view or four main characters sometimes, but in terms of writing those characters and writing the story, what's your process or method for keeping track of not only 4 points of view, but also a lot of twists and turns? How do you keep organized when you write?
Well, this is maybe a surprising answer. This organization you speak of, I'm not quite sure about that. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know the end of the book before I start writing. I just start writing, and the characters sort of reveal themselves when the time comes, and the story reveals itself as the time comes. So it's almost as if I was, if you and I were having lunch and I was telling you about person A and I was telling you their story, and then I was telling you, and did you hear about Lacey, this and this and this, and I would tell you her story. So it isn't, there's two answers to it. One is, it isn't hard at all to keep track of everything for me because I'm really telling their stories, and it's in chronological time. So what comes next, and then what comes next, and what comes next in their lives. The challenge, and I think it's really fun, is as their stories start to intertwine, how to make sure that the timeline is correct and the continuity is correct. And, it's Tuesday for Ellie, and Tuesday for Meg, and how are the times fitting together in the book? So I want to keep my timeline going relentlessly forward. There's forward motion to the book at every moment. So the way I organize it is I'll write my chapter, and then I make a list. It says chapter 1, day 1 of the book, Monday, 9 a.m. And I'll just, I'll write Lacey's point of view. And so I know when I look at it afterwards, I'm sort of outlining as after I write it is sort of the way it happens. So I have a list of chapter by chapter, what day it is, whose point of view it is, and what happens. But I don't write that I don't make that chart until after I write that part of the book. So then when I'm, as I'm progressing in the book, when someone says in the book, was it only 2 weeks ago that Jimmy was killed? I don't think, oh my golly, I have no idea whether it was 2 weeks ago. I can go back and look at my chapter chart and see when it was. As for the end, I don't know the end. So that's what gets me to my computer every day is I think, I can't wait to see what happens next. And I write the book to see what happens. It's sort of the same way as being an investigative reporter. I'm going out to look for the story. I don't know what the story is because if I did, it wouldn't be news. So I'm going out to look for the story. And that's the same thing I do when I'm writing my books. I sit down and I write and I see what story emerges. It's exciting. It's scary. It's like you never know what twists and turns are going to happen. And every day I think, wow, that's surprising. So when I get to the end, when people say to me, wow, I finished The First to Lie, or I finished The Murder List, that ending really surprised me. I'm like, yeah, wasn't that a surprise? I surprised myself, and I surprise myself every time. And I love that. I think that's one of the absolute joys of writing, is that we as authors, our imagination, when it's on fire, works so hard that it makes new realities, gives us ideas that we didn't know were coming. And I absolutely live for that.
That's really fun, and I can imagine that there are some people listening who absolutely resonate and agree with that, and other people who are just like curled up in the fetal position right now thinking about.
Oh, I know, and I know you're so very right. You're so very right, and I have talked to I have talked to each kind of person, because we all. I mean, it's kind of reassuring, isn't it, that we all do it the way we do it. And so what works for one person doesn't work for the other person, and it doesn't matter, because there's no right or wrong. It's just how we do it. And again, I think I can tell you that there is not a day that goes by when I'm writing when I don't think, oh, I wish I had an outline. I wish I had an outline. And then I vow to myself that the next time I write a book, I'm going to have an outline. And then I never do, because it's not how I do it. And then I have so many friends who say, if I didn't have an outline, I would kill myself. Their brains just can't work without the outline. So it's great. It works both ways. And new writers can know that, if they try it one way and it doesn't work, then just try it the other way, or a little of each.
Yeah, you got to find the way that works best for you.
Yeah, exactly.
What kinds of research did you do for the book?
Oh, well, that's interesting. I did enough I talked to several, actually, pharmaceutical sales reps, because that was the part of the story that I didn't really know. I really wanted to have a great insight into what it felt like to go from doctor's office to doctor's office selling a certain medication or drug, and to know what that felt like, and, what the pressures were, and what the responsibilities were, and, what the security, frankly, was, and what the goals were, all those kinds of things. I wanted that to be very authentic. So I had long talks with several of those. I talked to some researchers and some pharmaceutical researchers, just to understand the process of how drugs are tested, and how much a company would know about a drug before it went on the market. I'm trying to write a thriller. I'm trying to write a psychological suspense. So it's this juggle between making it authentic without having a bunch of stuff that nobody really needs to know in it. So I need to know it, so I need to know what I can leave out. So the world that was new to me, I've done many stories about pharmaceutical companies and the pharmaceutical industry. So as a reporter, as I said, I've been a reporter for more than 40 years. So I have a lot of sort of research tucked away and experiences tucked away that I can draw on from the stories that I've already done. So I always do that. But in this particular story, I wanted to get a little bit deeper and a little more emotionally deeper, actually. That was the other thing in talking to pharmaceutical sales reps, not just what they had to do, but how they felt about it. And that was important to me, too.
When you write, do you tend to include autobiographical elements, or do you steer away from them? Obviously, there's the investigative journalism aspect of this book that is that you could use your experience from. Are there other examples?
Well, it's complicated, because my novels aren't my investigative stories turned into fiction. I take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, sort of a Rubik's Cube of my life, and twist and turn and click, click, click. But my books are fiction, and if they're autobiographical, it's not intentional. We all are who we are, and we all have our reservoirs of experiences and emotions that we draw from. So when people say, well, how much of this book is you? I think, well, none of it. It's fictional, or all of it because I thought of it. So it's not a really tit for tat, quid pro quo kind of, I did this, so I'll put this in the book kind of thing. I know what it feels like to be undercover. That was very helpful for this book, what you have to do and what you have to know and how you feel. But my undercover is different, so I think that's what makes everybody's books different, is that we only have the building blocks of our experiences and our emotions, and then somehow the mechanism of how our brains work. And so that's going to be different every time. That's why, when people say, I never tell people what my books are about before I finish them because I fear that someone will steal my idea. And I think no one could possibly steal your idea. Forget about it. Every person's book. I mean, very, very specifically, Joe Finder, the fabulous thriller author, Joe Finder, and I were having dinner. About 6 months before my book came out, before The First to Lie came out. And it was also about 6 months before his book called House on Fire came out. And I said to him, what's your book about? What's your new book about? And he said, I'll tell you if you tell me. And so I said, okay, it's kind of about the daughter of a pharmaceutical mogul's family who finds out something bad about the drug that her family's company is making and has to decide whether to tell. And Joe says, oh. And I said, so what's yours about? And he says, it's kind of about a daughter of a pharmaceutical mogul who finds out something bad about the company's drug and has to decide whether to tell about it. And it was exactly the same. Our book, the log line like that of our books was exactly the same. And we both kind of looked at each other over wood-fired pizza and thought, oh my golly, we're doomed. And I was more
And yet
doomed.
I bet your books are nowhere near
not at
the
all.
same.
And that's my total point. That's my total point. You wouldn't even think of them the same way. They're just not even in the same universe. And so that is such a perfect example of how books are so personal, and that each author could only write the book they write. And that's the joy of it, isn't it? That, when you see a Hank book, or you see a Joe Finder book, or you see a Jillian McMillan book, you know what you're going to get. There's the DNA of a Hank book, no matter what the story is. And that's what makes them special.
Yep, I absolutely
every book,
agree.
not just mine, but every book special.
Right. Yeah. What can you tell us about the book that you are working on right now?
Oh, I don't know. It is.
Does it have a title?
It doesn't. It has a potential title, but I'm not sure that's going to be the title. I just don't know. We're having a big discussion about it in 3 days, so I'm looking forward to that. And after that, I'll probably know more. But this book is about fame. I think it might be, you were talking about our personal experiences. This might be, this uses a different part of my life, and that is, it's about fame. It's about celebrity. It's about being on television and how vulnerable you are when you're on television, because people know who you are. You walk down the street or go to the mall. Remember those things. And people know me. They'll say, hi, Hank. Or sometimes people say, oh, Hank, I love you. And I don't know who those people are. I don't know them, but they know me, right? And that's an interesting quandary. Or if I'm live on television, they know I'm not home, don't they? Because I'm live on television. Or if I'm live at the scene, doing a live shot at the scene of a story, they know exactly where I am. They can see me on TV. It's live. They can find me. So that kind of, and what about my family? If they know where I am, then they know where I'm not. they know when I leave the station or when I come in the morning. It's very vulnerable. And I'm the investigative reporter. And I had a news director once who told me that a good investigative reporter comes to town and stays there until everybody hates them, because your job as an investigative reporter is to discover secrets and make them public, secrets that people may not want you to have told. So, in some circles, I'm not the most popular person there is. So, I've been chased and threatened and had people come to my house and gotten incredibly nasty letters and phone calls and emails and all those kinds of things. So what is it like to be like that? And what is it like when you're trying to have a perfect life and show, because according to, I will tell you, I'm hesitating here because I don't want to be too, but if I'm at a shopping mall and I'm walking down the aisle at a mall, I think about make sure that I have a pleasant expression on my face, because people know who I am, and they might think, what's she so angry about, or what's she so mad about? So this being a public person is great. I love it. I'm thrilled being on television. I love being a reporter. I love being a writer. But people know where I am and where I'm not, and that puts other people in my life potentially in jeopardy. And sort of that's what the story's about. I had somebody ask me to tell what the story was in 10 words. I only had 10 words. So I figured it was hard to do. So I figured out fame, fortune, your perfect daughter. Can you keep one secret? And that's what it's about.
Final break of the podcast. When we come back, we will be talking about some of Hank's other books. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion to my interview. Again, I am speaking today with author Hank Phillippi Ryan. Let's get back to that interview.
Are there any other of your books that you would like to highlight or bring up at this point?
Oh my goodness. Well, we talked about The Murder List. I'm still floating from The Murder List having won the Anthony for Best Novel of the Year. My first novel, I've written 2 series and 3 standalones. My first series, which won the Agatha for Best First Novel, began with Prime Time, which is a really fun, fast-paced mystery set in Boston, first person. And there are 4 episodes, 4 books in that series: Prime Time, Face Time, Airtime, Drive Time. They're about a reporter in Boston who is worried she's getting too old for television. So you can see where that came from. And I love those books. That was the beginning of my crime fiction career. And those books are still in print. I'm still getting royalties for them. They're still selling. Prime Time is the beginning. And then there are the Jane Ryland thrillers. Those are sort of investigative thrillers, starting with The Other Woman, which won the Mary Higgins Clark Award. And those are bigger, multiple points of view investigative thrillers, which I love. And then my book, Trust Me, was my first psychological standalone, which was absolutely a life-changing book to write a standalone psychological novel. And that got me hooked on standalones, followed by Trust Me, and then The First to Lie. So you can see my career path has, evolved, that my books are different than they were from the beginning. But I love those. I love my first books. And I wouldn't change a word of them, actually. They, one of my goals as an author is to do 100% as good a job as I possibly can at the time. And I hope to grow and become a better author. But those books still, I mean, they're not that old. They're like 10 years old. So I was going to say they still hold up beautifully. It's not like they're ancient. But I'm very proud of that. And I'm very, I still really count my blessings with joy of how my career has evolved and proceeded, and still seems to be. That's a very difficult thing to do. So we'll see what happens next.
All right. You mentioned earlier that you started writing around age 55. So talk about the kind of the path that led you to writing fiction.
Oh, I grew up in really rural Indiana, so rural that you couldn't see another house from our house. And my sister and I used to ride our ponies to the library to get books, and we'd read up in the hayloft of the barn behind our house, and that's where I read Sherlock Holmes and Nancy Drew and Agatha Christie. And I knew that I either wanted to be a crime fiction author, or maybe I'd like to be a detective. I thought it might be cooler to be Sherlock Holmes than to write about Sherlock Holmes. But through just life is so nonlinear, but I eventually became a reporter in the 70s. My first job in radio in 1970, and then in television in 1975. And that's storytelling. I told a story every day. I didn't make stuff up, obviously, but I learned about writing and crafting and beginning, middle, and end, and what makes a good story, what makes a good, thrilling, irresistible, entertaining, enlightening, important, educational story. But one day at Channel 7 when I was 55, as I said, I just really had a good idea. And it's one of those things that's sort of hard to explain, except to say, I just knew it was a good idea. And I came home and I said to my husband, I just had a great idea for a mystery. I know it's a good idea, and I'm going to write a book. And Jonathan says, great, honey. Do you know how to write a book? And I'm like, how hard can that be? I've read 1 million of them. And I'd soon, obviously learned how hard it could be. But that turned out to be Prime Time, which, as I said, won the Agatha for Best Novel of the Year. And that was my first book. That was the first book I ever wrote. That was the first book that I ever even tried to write. And it sold right away. And there you have it. I mean, took a long time. But to get there. But I do think we do things when it's meant to happen. I don't think I'm absolutely certain that I couldn't have written Prime Time at any other time in my life than when I did. So again, I'm a complete proponent of doing what feels like the right thing at the time, because you can't push it. It's just when it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Out of your own journey, then, do you have advice for aspiring authors?
I do, and I do think that that the key is that you want to do it. That sounds so silly, but when I was writing Prime Time, there was a time sort of in the middle of the book, the horrible middle, where I thought, wow, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know how to do this. And I called my mother, of all places, and I said, Mom, I really want to write this book. I know this is going to be good, but I'm not sure I can finish it. And she said, well, darling, you will if you want to. And I thought, well, yeah, right? So true. I mean, you can procrastinate. You can organize your spice rack alphabetically if you want to. Or if you want to write a book, you just write a book. It's hard. It takes a while. It's 100,000 words. Not everybody can write a good book, but you can't write a good book until you start it. Until you write chapter 1 and just keep going and stop second guessing yourself and just tell a story and know you can fix it later. It's not a quiz. You're writing a book. So you write 1 page at a time, 1 line at a time. And then you write another line and another line and another line. And it's absolutely only arithmetic that if you keep doing that, you'll have a book, and then you'll have then you'll have a first draft. And then you think, okay, now it's time to start again. And you revise and revise and revise and get better and read, and be patient with yourself. It takes a long time to write a book, way longer than you would ever think it would take, way longer. However long you think it would take, it's longer than that to make it good. So you just persevere. I mean, it's just, if there were a secret thing that you could do to make it work, then everybody would do that, right? So a lot of it is luck and timing and a little bit of magic and a lot of education, but most of it is just doing it. It's just the most basic thing in the world.
Right. Butt in the chair, fingers on the keyboard.
Completely.
Yep. When you take the time to read for yourself, what do you like to read and who are your favorite authors?
Oh, one of the funny things about being an author like this is that some of the innocent joy of reading is gone, because I read a lot of books now for blurbs, so I'm getting a lot of advanced review copies from authors or publishers or agents who want me to read their clients' books early on, so that I could give a blurb for the cover, and that's great. So I love that. I'm honored by that, and it's a huge responsibility. So a lot of the books that I'm reading are those early copies. I also have I want to say show, but that's not really right. I also have events on called First Chapter Fun, which is with Hannah Mary McKinnon and I every Tuesday and Thursday at 11:30 p.m. Eastern on Facebook and Twitter. Nope, that's wrong. Facebook and Instagram. Read out loud the first chapter of a new book. So because in these days where we can't go to bookstores and there's no discoverability, and how are we supposed to find out about new books, Hannah and I decided that would be a great way to introduce readers to new books. So I read a lot of books. So when I discover a book for First Chapter Fun, when they're really good, I have the joy of reading the whole book. So I just finished, for instance, my favorite authors are Sherry LaPena and Gilly McMillan and Hannah Mary McKinnon and Ruth Ware, those kinds of Lisa Unger, those kinds of wonderful psychological suspense authors, Anthony Horowitz. And, the problem with reading these days is that I become an editor every time I read a book. So it takes a really good book for me to not say, oh, I wouldn't have done it that way, or, oh, I wonder why they wrote it like that, or, please don't let it be the sister. Oh, no, it's the sister. Why did you do that? Right. So I get very critical. But when you find a fabulous book, I just read Ellie Griffith's The Stranger Diaries, and wow, that's great. My inner editor just went away. The same with Andrew Wilson's A Talent for Murder, where Agatha Christie is the sleuth of all good ideas. And I just powered through that. So reading is different for me now, but I still read psychological suspense. I love to see what people are writing and what they're doing. And when I don't read psychological suspense, I often read nonfiction, just to sort of get my brain working in a different process from time to time.
Thank you for that. I know you have a website, so if you can tell people your website as well as where they might be able to interact with you on social media.
Oh, wonderful. I'm on social media way too much. My website is hankphillippiryan.com. And if you click on contact, that comes right to me, no middle person, just hankphillippiryan.com and click on contact, and I will get that email. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Hank P. Ryan, and I'm on Facebook at Hank Phillippi Ryan Author. I'm also on Facebook at First Chapter Fun, and I know your listeners will want to check that out. It's quite amazing. And I'm also the co-host of an organization called The Back Room, which provides interactive online author events with spectacular authors like Joe Finder and Heather Gudenkauf and Lisa Unger and Fiona Davis and Melanie Benjamin. I mean, this array of authors where we have Karen Dion and I are the hosts, and we have 2 panels a month. So go to the back room. It's at bksp.org, like backspace, bksp.org. And look at the wonderful lineup of panels. They're free and interactive, and it's quite spectacular. So there's a list of places that your listeners can find me, and I would love to see them at any and all of them.
Awesome.
But be sure to follow me on Instagram and on BookBub, because I have contests, I have giveaways, I have all kinds of book news. And when you go to my website, hankphillippiryan.com, be sure to sign up for the newsletter, because that is full of stuff that only goes to newsletter subscribers.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. I have one more random, very nosy question. That is Hank short for something, or is it a nickname?
Oh dear. Hank, my real name is Harriet.
Okay.
And when I was growing up, I was just the geekiest, nerdiest, most unpopular little girl in the world. Mm-hmm. And when you have all that not going for you, and then your name is Harriet, it was awful. I'm too old for Harriet the Spy. It hadn't been written yet.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, if it had been written, then I would have been cool, and my life would have been completely different. But no, all I had in my generation was Ozzie and Harriet, and so you just don't want to be that. And so someone in college actually said, "You don't look like a Harriet. We'll call you Hank." That was in 1967. And I said, "Sure, that's great, whatever, anything but Harriet." And it's been Hank ever since. And I don't even know whose idea it was. I don't know where it came from. Isn't that so crazy?
Oh, wow.
No idea.
Yeah. I love it. That's a great story.
Well, life is crazy, huh? You never know.
You never know. So we've talked about a lot of different things today, and I appreciate that. But is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to bring up about your books or writing, anything we haven't covered?
No, I think you're fantastic. It's been really fun to talk with you. You obviously love what you do, and you're so successful at it. And what an honor to be with you today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I was actually thinking the same thing about you. You obviously love what you do. I mean, you're so passionate and fun to talk to. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
My pleasure. Anytime. We'll talk together maybe when my new book comes out next year. It'll be out, whatever it's called, will be out on September of 2021 if all goes as planned, which even
Wonderful.
Now these days, sometimes it does.
Yeah, sometimes. And, who knows what can happen in almost a year.
Oh, as well we all know now, huh?
That's right.
I love when interviews end on a giggly note. It just makes me happy. Thank you once again to Hank for joining me to talk about her novel, The First to Lie, as well as some of her other books. I really enjoyed speaking with her. Thank you, as always, to you, my listeners. I always, always, always appreciate you. As such, if you are a fan of this podcast, please do remember to write a review of the podcast or give us a 5-star review. Both are extremely helpful in getting this podcast out to other book lovers such as yourselves. If you are, also on social media, you should definitely follow us, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I would love to hear from you, interact with you, hear your questions, what you're reading, all of that good stuff. I'm nosy. Help me out. Let me know what's going on in your world and what you're reading. My TBR list is ever expanding, and it will never be all read, but I still like to put new books on it. So let me know what you're reading. Again, I hope you had a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving. I hope that you will join me again for Tuesday's episode when I will be speaking with author James A. Ross about his debut historical novel. It's called Hunting Teddy Roosevelt, and as you may have guessed, it is about Teddy Roosevelt. So join me on Tuesday for that, and we'll learn about Teddy Roosevelt and the safari he did after his second term in office, as well as something about Teddy Roosevelt that you probably didn't know. I certainly learned something new from this book and this interview, so join me for that. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope that your life, as always, involves plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.